right, well, good morning. Pleased to be able to provide an update on federal activities. My name is Ken Schaefer. I'm the Deputy Executive Director for the Federal Geographic Data Committee, and our office is located in the U.S. Geological Survey and the Department of the Interior. So today I'm going to cover three general topics: the Federal Geographic Data Committee itself and some of the key activities it's doing, the Geospatial Data Act, and the National Spatial Data Infrastructure, and I'll go into each of these in a little more detail. So for those who are not aware of us, so the FGDC is a federal interagency committee of senior executives, and they are directed within the executive branch to be the lead for development, implementation, review of policies, practices, and standards for geospatial data. Established in 1990, both by OMB Circular A16, so circular is how they direct the federal agencies, whether they're civil, DoD, or intelligence community, and then backed up with presidential executive order. And then it was codified in law in 2018 by the Geospatial Data Act. And so a few of the key things that the FGDC is directed to do is to lead the development of the National Spatial Data Infrastructure, which I'll get into in a little more detail, and to coordinate national geospatial data assets. And so these are national data sets managed by federal agencies on behalf of the federal government. So not just mission-specific exercise. And then the supporting entity for the committee and its activities is the Office of the Secretariat, and that's where I'm located. And so we provide administrative support to the whole committee structure and the agencies and the leadership. We also provide subject matter expertise and strategic planning, technical support for the committee, and we support a federal advisory committee, which is a committee under the Federal Advisory Act, which is the official way of getting advice and recommendations from non-federal entities. And so the current leadership is Assistant Secretary for Water and Science, Tanya Trujillo, with the Department of the Interior, and the Vice Chair most recently has been the Deputy Federal CIO. And this has been vacant since the end of the calendar year when this person went to another organization. There is a new acting executive director for the FGDC. He leads the Office of the Secretariat, and he is the person that you will probably see most out in the landscape coordinating with partnerships and at professional organizations. He also does a lot of coordination internationally. So the FGDC is a committee, and it's a committee of senior officials for geospatial information that make decisions on behalf of the federal government in relation to its charge. And that committee, which is currently about 29 member departments, is guided by an executive committee, and that's a subset of about 10 of the biggest players, the folks who have the largest investment and mission space in the geospatial community. So these would include like Interior, Department of Homeland Security, NASA, you know, there are a number of them, including the Department of Defense. So one thing that's important to realize is that in addition to the circular, which has been around for 20 years, and the Geospatial Data Act, the number of mandates and policies that include FGDC actions require agencies to coordinate with the FGDC, or are policies or laws that the FGDC as a body has to take into account when determining policies, such as the Evidence Act, which establishes the federal data catalog, data.gov, which is tied closely to the geospatial platform. I know we're getting technical here, but they are dependent relationships. And so we have to take all these things into account when we're determining how we're doing business. Now, Circular A16, so this is the directive from the Office of the President, the executive branch. This is currently in a revision. And last time it was revised, it was in 2002. A lot has happened since 2002. And so not only is this revision supporting the implementation of the Geospatial Data Act, that act is focused on geospatial specifically, but it also has to take into account all these other policies and requirements for the broader federal data enterprise. And so that adds a significant amount of effort. Now, there is a line that's not on this chart, which is the resource line, which goes the other direction. So, but what this does show is there is a huge heightened interest in the necessity and the use of geospatial across the federal space and for the nation. So the Geospatial Data Act itself, so this again reflects the growing recognition of the essential component of geospatial data and technology, and it facilitates across the full spectrum of its requirements broad cooperation between public and private sector. And so what you see along the bottom are the key elements of the law itself. There are a few others, but these are the key ones. And so it establishes the Federal Geographic Data Committee, its roles, responsibilities, its leadership. It establishes the National Geospatial Advisory Committee, so that's the Federal Advisory Committee I was talking about, and I'll talk about that a little more in a few minutes. Establishes the NSDI, so this is national, not federal. This is National Spatial Data Infrastructure, and I'll get into that a little bit more. The National Geospatial Data Assets, these are the 175 data sets aligned under 18 data themes that are approved as authoritative national data and are to be made available through the law, through the geospatial platform. Second to last element you see up there, the federal portal, so that it can be used and reused. Standards are another key element for interoperability and reuse of the data, and as well as there's a significant focus on agency responsibilities. So a key thing to remember is you talk about FGDC as a committee, but that is a committee of agencies. And so it's the agencies that have the significant roles and responsibilities for adhering to and implementing the requirements within the law. And so I'm going to go through a couple of these sections here and talk about some things that have occurred most recently. So under governance, under the committee itself, so the committee, and I spoke about the executive committee, the subset of the 10 agencies. So we reestablished them at the end of last year. It was a group that provides the guiding executive leadership for the broader steering committee. And because of the investment and the work in that space that they do, the rest of the agencies pretty much follow behind. So what we did last year, the steering committee members asked this to be reestablished. It used to report and exist solely to advise the chair, and they wanted that changed so that it actually advised the broader committee, which means it is not at the whim of the chair. Regardless of who sits in that position, it can continue to provide continuity, because that chair changes whenever there's an administration change. And so we asked them, once we had it established, identify your top 5 priorities. You saw the chart of things, right? So what are your top 5 things? We know we don't have the resources to do it all. Where are we going to focus? And so this is in ranked order of the 5 to their time for first. And so we've identified an executive champion for each one of these, and they have started to develop a core team of folks to look into the planning. So standards are going to be led by the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, which has a very robust standards program. And this isn't an evaluation of standards themselves. This is an evaluation of how the FGDC is going to reassess its standards program and how it's going to establish a new process, because it basically has not been a resource since 2017. A lot of the agencies are getting dinged by their inspector generals because they don't have the standards that should be in place. So there's a lot of interest here. FGDC governance, governance is really about decision making. What bodies do you need to make the decisions you need to operate? And so the Secretariat is leading that, Office of the Secretariat, and we're going to be aligning requirements with needs. We're trying to get rid of any standing committees that are just standing committees. The geospatial platform, so this is a shared service directed by the Office of Management and Budget and then put into the law. That will be led by the Department of the Interior, because they are the managing partner for that portal on behalf of the FGDC agencies. And the agencies jointly fund that capability. And so they'll be doing evaluation and oversight of the platform to improve the service capability. The NSDI strategic plan and the country action plan. So the Census Bureau is going to be leading this, as will our executive director. And I'm going I'm gonna skip this for now because I'm gonna touch on something else, touch on this a little bit later, but we're also looking at in relation to the next NSDI strategic plan, evaluating the United Nations Integrated Geospatial Information Framework. This is a plan that is really designed to help countries develop an action plan for geospatial. We're going to see what elements in that plan might be able to help advance the NSDI plan for the U.S. And then administration priorities, they are always on the docket depending on what they are, and the leadership varies there, but it's really about making existing data and services available to address the issues. So the National Geospatial Advisory Committee, so this is a key way that the FGDC gets input from partners and stakeholders. And I want to point out that the current chair of the committee is Gary Thompson, who's the Deputy Hazard Mitigation Chief and the NC Geodetic Survey Chief for NC Department of Public Safety, and I think he's presenting in probably one of the rooms next to me right now. And so this is a representative of all levels of government, tribes, private sector, academia, and nonprofits. And you'll see throughout my slides that repetitive group of sectors. And their current, so every year they have, between the NGAC and the FGDC committee, we develop a series of topics for them to address. We have had some standing committees be established. So the 3D elevation program, which is the ones that put in USGS does LIDAR for the nation. So there's now a standing committee based on the landslides law that came out requiring that. And this group will look at assessing technology, elevation technology, sensors, making recommendations not only on the technology but on the programs moving forward. We have a long-standing Landsat group looking at not only the program but also bleeding edge uses of the data, analysis-ready data, solutions, things like that. Geospatial Data Act, there's a requirement in the law. We have a committee that refreshes every year for a few months to review the annual reports. And this year we're actually having another group that is looking at implementation since we've been doing this for a few years now. And then geospatial excellence and innovation, and this is kind of a free-for-all. What are those big ideas that are out there that could help the community that we should be paying attention to? Additionally, in the law, there's a lot of reporting and accountability requirements, not only for the agencies, but also for FGDC and in the management of the national geospatial data assets. And so every year, individual agencies, there are 16 required in the law to create fairly significant reports. There are 18 NGDAs reports that have to be created. They're rolled up into an annual report for the FGDC. We put that information in dashboards so it's available for analysis as we begin. This is a constant cycle happening every year. And so it is a significant, and they're all online. They're all out there for evaluation. It's a significant effort. If you look at the two-year span between the plans that are required, the reports of reviews, the reports themselves, the roll-ups, the biennial audits, and the reports to Congress, you're talking about a significant level of investment in resources to do this. And quite frankly, it's a bit of a barrier in helping the federal government move forward in a lot of its programs. But we're doing it. Now I'm going to jump into the NSDI, National Spatial Data Infrastructure. So, break down that title a little bit. It is national. It's not just federal. It's about spatial data and the infrastructure to deliver it. And so you can see up there the elements, technology, policies, criteria, standards across to enhance data sharing across the different sectors with the goal that it shall ensure that data across these sources is available and easily integrated to enhance understanding of the physical and cultural world. So you can start seeing where standards for interoperability and all this comes into play. But where are we today on the NSDI? So as you've seen from just what I've put up here, and I'm sure you've seen it in your own jobs, there's a critical need for the data and the information and then the resulting knowledge that is built upon that to address not only local, state, regional issues, but national, global issues as well. There are a number of robust state spatial data infrastructures. North Carolina is a great example, and you should be very proud of that. It has established, we have now established in law a federal portal, an official federal portal that agencies are required to support to make their data available and make it available in reusable and accessible formats, findable, accessible, interchangeable, and reusable. There are a lot of data and services available online, either free or for fee, not just federal. You're not really going to find any for fee federal, but they're out there, right? We have them in our hands, we have them in our cars, we use them all the time. So it's become part of life. But we still have inconsistent coverage for data, for capability, for investment. And so the bottom line is we still lack this national capability, this portfolio of spatial data that can be applied to whatever issue, topic, or event needs to be addressed. And so, the NSDI is all about coordination. It's about a coordinated approach and bringing not only the partnerships and the data together into this national framework, with the Fed, but it has to be shared investment, it has to be shared effort to make it work. And so one of the things that we're doing now is we're restarting the NSDI strategic planning process. And we've already identified executive champions within the federal space. So the Census Bureau and the Secretariat Executive Director are going to lead this. And we have a project manager. And it's going to be based on the current executive plan as a starting point. And you can see the four broad goals of the plan in the circle there. But this plan was highly vetted, not only across the Fed, but with partners. And so it's a pretty solid foundation upon which to work. But we also know we have to look at national priorities and current circumstances, things that have changed and are changing, and how we might need to adapt that. It's going to require, again, broad stakeholder engagement. That's a key here, not only federal and through our federal advisory committee, but also reaching out to the sectors individually, getting more out into the community. We haven't been doing a lot of that, especially since COVID. There's a lot more of that starting up. And we're taking a little bit different approach here. Typically, we had done 4-year plans that aligned with the administration periods. Because when a new administration comes in, they bring new priorities. And this time, we're going to look decadal. We're going to put a strategic plan out there that looks much longer in the future and kind of help set a vision. Where do we want to be in 10 years with this? And then we'll back it up with implementation plans on what are the steps that are needed to do and to get there. And then we can adapt, every year, every 2 years, whatever the circumstances require. But a key thing here is looking down that lower right-hand corner is that implementation plan, we're looking at taking the approach of having a federal implementation plan, and then working with the different sectors to have implementation plans themselves. And this is a key difference. A number of years ago, we had a plan. It had non-federal leadership responsibilities for non-federal leadership, and it had federal. Some of them didn't make it as far as they intended to, but because it was a federal plan, the federal agencies were highly criticized that we weren't able to move them forward. So then the next time we said, all right, we'll plan what we can control, and of course that went the other way. That shook the pendulum to the other side, right? And so now we're trying to bring that back and say, how do we get these things aligned and get plans that we can actually all get behind? And so here's our current timeline here. We've already started with the initial planning through the end of the calendar year. We're looking to do more awareness promotion, soliciting initial feedback with the plan of having an initial draft in December. There are planned 2 processes to get input from stakeholders through the April time period in 2024, and adjudication and approval, and hopefully have the final plan out by July. And so in looking at some of these collaboration and input opportunities, so the 4 I've really covered here, I'm pulling out. So OMBA 16 will be going into public review likely in the next couple of months. It could be in 4 weeks, it could be in 8 weeks. You never quite know with OMB what that time period is going to be. But we've been working with them weekly to get this out. And there's a real commitment on their behalf. There will be another call for NGAC nominations this year. Because we have to do annual membership assignments, we have now gotten into a 2-year. We'll do a nomination that when you submit, you are eligible for 2 years instead of 1 year. And so that will be coming out this year. You'll also be seeing more FGDC representation at stakeholder meetings, and I imagine in the next, 6 or 8 weeks, we'll have a better approach for when we're going to conferences on how to get some additional feedback during those sessions. And on the NSDI strategic plan, what I just covered here, we're going to be doing a lot more promotion of awareness to get that initial feedback and then have formal feedback periods in the next year. So that's the quick overview. Thank you. Are there any questions? So federal is typically thought of the federal agencies. And so the federal agencies have no, what's the right way to say this? I mean, that really is it right there. Federal are the federal agencies. It's not state, it's not local, it's not tribal, it's not private sector. And so like the committee itself is a federal committee. Its members are federal agency representatives. National means that it is of the nation, right? So it includes state, local, tribal. It includes all those partners. They are partners, they are constituents, stakeholders in those efforts. So data.gov is the federal data catalog. It's run by the Government Services Administration, GSA. And it is for all federal data, not just geospatial. All open federal geospatial data. All open federal data. The GeoPlatform is spatially specific. So it only handles geospatial data. Everything that's in the platform gets pulled from the data.gov catalog. They've gone through numerous iterations where the platform at one time was ahead of data.gov, so it actually was the registry. Now it's shifted to where it's supposed to be in law, where data.gov is the registry, and what is the geospatial records that are put in. Because remember, agencies have to submit not just geospatial, but all their other records as well into data.gov. And so then platform pulls a subset of those that are tagged as geospatial records. Yep. Private sector as well. Yeah, and I don't have a slide that shows the members of the FACA, but so like Jack Dangerman sits on it. He's sat on it a couple times now. Microsoft, Oracle, Google, a number of the large satellite companies. So there's very broad representation across the private sector. And we're always looking for additional, companies that are interested. So. Other questions? All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.